So this is a restorative session, and we're gonna kind of lay out the base work for our sitting bones. And I want you to start with your bolster underneath your seat, and you'll have a belt. And you might as well put the blocks so they're just simply underneath the legs. Don't necessarily want to go the lowest you can with your blocks. You want to feel like it's kind of cozy, right? It's like the knees have a little bit of rise. They might feel like they're slightly above the pelvis. Sometimes you're grilled with postures that the knees need to be pelvis or lower. But right now we're finding where we can get a little bit of this uh, awareness in that mid body. Okay, so start with kind of feeling your cushion. Okay, both you and the cushion, and then feel how that rib space is naturally arching. Okay, and enjoy the arches here, the arches of the spine, the feet. And then as you take a hold of your belt unbuckled, you're going to move the hands out wide on the belt. And as you lift it up, work with a generous spacing where you feel like you're almost elongating across the chest. So you're opening out the chest circulation via the hold of the belt. So physically, as you feel the spine naturally arching, not necessarily trying to get it as tall as you possibly can reinforce, but your natural stance when you're in this shape with your blocks under you, your feet together, your belt holding open the ribs. And see if you can discover the shape where no matter how it looks, it may be best not to look at your shape as much as to feel the shape. Okay. And then you might eventually, if you tend to do gallery views, sometimes you can see how that shape is, but reinforce the open quality. And then I want you just to let the hands reach back, and the belt is going to be behind you. So a little careful with the shoulders. And then walk the hands in on the belt so it's quite snug next to the buttocks, and stretch the arms down towards the floor, holding your belt, palms facing towards the bolster, and work the shoulders as if they're on the sides of the spine, the blades, and instead of them just kind of hanging out there, right? The shoulders are working back and down the back. Okay, feel that. It's almost as if you have to kind of lift up your chest and consider lifting the chin, but maybe eyes are closed and you're pondering the circulation dynamic here. In breath, filter the air in, and out breath, and let go of the belt. Put it aside so it's off of your mat. And let's take a motion with the legs. So I want you to slide the blocks away and stretch the right leg forward, foot pushing, and then cross that left foot over the right leg so that left foot is, it's kind of semi-parallel, right? It might be the toes turn a little bit towards the right, but be kind of casual about your postural discipline on this one. Kind of get a feel that you have a heel pushing in front and you make the most of that. And then you reach the right hand to the left knee, you're reaching to the left leg, and it could be the whole leg you're getting. So I want you to notice your ability to keep the heart forward. And then as you twist to the left, you'll reach your left hand back to the blankets, and then either keep a hold of the leg with the hand or reach your right elbow to the left leg and then straighten that arm and twist. So you might find this feature is helpful to strengthen those small muscles that link the vertebrae, right? The key is that we're working on keeping the structure free and mobile through these kind of disciplined patterns. So with that in breath, we're still in the twist, and you'll feel that opportunity to rotate And let the rotation come with the breath. So in breath, spine lifts or it has a sense of up, and out breath, twist. And maybe visualize that pattern and then come out of it. So we're not lingering too much. Hands are going to be either on the bolster or back on the floor, depending on your arm length. So you can push yourself to sit up. And then switching, so the left leg is forward next to the right, both feet reaching front. And then bow forward to the thighs, thigh bow. The hands might have to slide up on the bolster for those that have the fingers on the other side, or you could grasp onto the bolster with your palms facing forward towards your legs. And as you reach through the waistband to lengthen, I feel the legs sensation and even into my lower leg bones. A little bit of my feet are kind of have twinkles of sensation on the soles. Okay, so as you hold on to that bolster, bend your elbows to pull yourself back upright and cross the right leg over the left and change to the twist to the right side this time. And this time we'll go in a little quicker because you have some expectation that this is the direction, but feel how this waistband has responded to your motion to the right. So does the waist turn? It's a good pose pattern to start with because you'll notice sometimes the rigidity that we have in our structure before we practice. So use this as a check-in and then reach the right hand maybe to the blanket and left arm, the whole arm on the outer side of that right leg. And you get a feel for the left hand open and explore the breathing and the rotation. Maybe your head turns, maybe your spine feels like it's kind of winding. So we're working on strengthening the muscles along the spine. So you'll likely feel them attempting to wake up to the experience. Okay, now coming out, we'll turn back forward like we expect. And then as you uncross that left foot, or right foot, you're going to shift now to your back. So let's take our block and you'll put a block on its lowest setting, flat in front of your bolster. And when you slide your seat onto that block, this gives you a long line of support for your spine. So I like to have my feet kind of a little closer in the hips distance, perhaps. I tend to start with my toes turning slightly in. And as I observe the motion back, your hands could be on the bolster or on the floor behind. But you're going to lean your structure back and then maybe slide forward so you're certainly as much on the block as you could be. And then when you lower back, you have your sand nearby, right? Those things will be important. Ball, if you have block, that other block, wherever that is, make sure you have those items. And then as you work your way to your spine down on the supports, decide if you want 1 or 2 blankets under your head. You might be at the point where the 2 blankets is excessive energy into your neck. So feel what's best for you. You be the decider. And then we add sand to either the ribs or down to the tops of the thighs. And I want you to figure the way to use this sand so that it is supporting. Now, if the legs want to straighten, extend them both as well. And then support the opening of the whole front layers of the body. And so that's layers of the hip. The belly layer might be the most curious part to open because this certainly can do that. But some of us might find that that's a challenge in our back response. So use all the props to hold you up and rely on them to rest into them. And then offer the arms to open out. We'll go without the belt on this version today so that the opportunity is endless on your inside arrangements with opening your chest muscles. It's kind of a funny concept, the inside arrangements, like it's only you that will be working on that. It's not as if an outside individual could really assess that anyhow. But noticing how it might feel really good to open up the front, but vulnerable in some parts of the back. So if that's the case, then kind of feel your arrangement of your feet, if the stepping them a little wider helps your back muscles. Maybe for you, it's bringing them closer in. Who knows? It could be bending the knees. That might feel better on the back, or having just sand on your ribs, not on the top of your thighs. But come into the awareness of internal navigation through the chest, eyes relaxing, and breathing with that intention to filter and move the ribs wide on the in-breath. And then feeling if it's kind of caught in the tummy tunnel, right? If you feel the in-breath is very tightly netted or knitted, right, in that area, let the arms stretching open gradually influence your breathing. And again, if the head feels too high up, you might be surprised at this blanket situation, how it changes the support for opening the chest. Just removing one and making sure that the back of the skull is supported. You can nod your head a little side to side. And as the arms have this open quality, few moments to go a little slower with the breath. And once that midsection kind of starts to bubble up with some warmth, and obviously warmth, right, in the muscles, in the breathing muscles will help loosen up the tension in the back space. So let the spine warm itself up in these kind of healthful waves, right, for the back. Now we're going to take a pretty big shift here coming up. So we'll move the sand, and as it all goes away, the items that we'll need is really going to be your coordination, if you can call that. Actually, it's not a physical thing you'll get, but it is physical coordination you want to work for. So with this kind of layer of clear discipline length on the front, we're going to work on kind of sweeping that up. So I'm going to have you move into actually an inversion. And the inversions are classified, right, as chest openers. So I always find that to be interesting to bring that in after a visceral chest opener. So walk the feet in and kind of feel when the knees bend, even just try lifting a foot off the floor and just stay with your block underneath you. And kind of feel when the foot lifts up and knee pokes up towards the ceiling. That part of that leg and the back of that leg up into the low back space, it usually feels kind of good. And the other side that's down is a little bit pulled. So we're going to work on both of the legs moving up and just up. So we're going to first be sure we have only one blanket under our head. That's important. So if you've got two, remove one. And then you'll kind of shift your body a little to the side to move that block away, but be rather speedy with the shift. So you're going to move the block away and then you kind of push back onto the bolster a bit. So I push my feet down. So now I'm on the bolster, but I need to get more on it. So I'm going to lift up my heels, toes push down, heels lift up a little. And then see if you can lift up your hips just a small amount to slide the bolster ever so slightly under the back of your pelvis, right? It's not a big shift, but it's important now that you can feel some relief that your back, much of your back is on that, well, more of it. The back of the buttocks are on the bolster now. And then as you bring your feet up and your knees are in that full pattern of flexing, moving, I want you to add a ball or a block or nothing between the knees. So you'll try something and then you'll do the windshield wiper pattern and then decide if it's nice to have a spacer between the knees or if you prefer no spacer. Usually earlier in the day, well, first, most of the daytime hours, you probably will like the spacer, and later in the day, you won't really want that if you do this at all outside of this session, this kind of motion. So the spine is warmed up after a day, right? It's a little different with its opening, but right now we're trying to get it into some patterns of the opposite of where the ball or block is has a spacer in some ways with that item between your knees. And you can try it without, of course, but take a few moments letting the legs crossing and that united sensation of thighs. It's nice to have something to squeeze into. And with the pelvis rocking, enjoy that kind of lubrication for the hip. And it's so easygoing, right? This pattern, knees go side to side, but take a moment when you go to any side and notate and feel or make a felt sense of feeling those knees go to that side that you're on and how it moves into your hip, your side of your waist. Maybe you feel some more areas that kind of start to spark up sensation with the legs bending, and then take it to the other side and let that body weight sink into the bolster. If you're kind of rolling off your bolster, then you need to reset yourself on it. I know the bolsters are really only one size with their width, huh? Who knows what's ahead with that? Okay, now come back into the center. Great. So we made it back in the middle and lift up the feet. So you kind of notice if you've got that item between the knees, you're going to get a feel of lifting up. And then as you lift up the feet, since there's nothing too onto them, you're going to circle the feet and try to get that sense of rotation. And when the motion comes through the foot, see if you can exaggerate that movement. Get as much of the bottom of the foot to stretch as possible. And then with the knees bending, remove the ball and then take a sandbag and place it to the soles of the feet. It requires you to go into kind of a half plow. So when I draw the knees in towards my chest and I try to lift up my sand and keep it all pretty close to my leg bands. And as it goes onto the bottoms of the feet, you got some separation and probably not enough that you could put that ball or block back between them, but you have some separation so that the feet can flex and the weight. Here's where I sense some opportunity for my this whole complex of my core. So kind of let that sand settle, be sure that you're confident with your legs. And then notice that back body is elevated right at it's kind of clearly all the lumbars are lifted up. So you created the back bend, it's successful. And then you'll feel maybe the ribs kind of come to life because you've lifted up that part. So spend the energy on settling the back of the pelvis and the tailbone down and letting anything kind of settle into gravity. except you don't want to lose your sandbag. So you've got some exceptions. Lift up the arms towards the ceiling so they're both moving straight up, and the hands open and reaching them back overhead, over shoulder, and go slow. And if there's a little bit of a opportunity here for you to balance out the rib cage to lengthen. Great, so get a feel of that length. And the length could come from just the quality of the back of the legs. Like when we started, when we were sitting, the feet were forward. We had that opportunity to work with that reach of the back of the legs. When we're seated now, it's a little different. It's a little more comfortable, perhaps, once you have open hamstrings to keep the sand on the feet. And then balance out that circulation through the shoulders, moving back and down. If there's pretty good balance in your shoulder muscles right now, and you know that there is some imbalancing specifics going on, kind of celebrate this position, even though I know it's pretty plain and simple. You're on your back, your arms are just a little open. You can bend the elbows, you can stretch the arms straight out, but figuring the back is supported and it can expand, and the blades surrender back, opening the chest. And now as you bend through your knees, feel the spine widen, right? And noticing when the knees bend, when they get a little bit tense, you might find that's a good time to get rid of the sand, or before you notice that. And when you feel the thighs move to your rib cage, if you like that extra credit moment of circulation in the core and the lungs, right? Take that on, because I have pressure with my sand, and I'm taking slow, deep breaths and strengthening the lungs. So just when you kind of hold it in this middle space. Good. Now, as course, you're going to take off that sand, and we'll get a hold of a belt. And I want you to move the belt so it's lengthening under and full length, unbuckled under the left foot. And you're going to reach the right leg straight down and hold the belt firm with your right hand and cross the left leg to the right. Go downstream. So if you were kind of looking at a clock, right, you're going downstream to about maybe 4 or 5 o'clock type of motion in the range. But you want to feel that this left hip into the whole kind of slender side of the waist up into the rib heads here. That is pulling. There's a circulatory advantage right now with the belt as part of your pose. So see if you can kind of, you don't have to poke around there with your hand, but you know, you get a feel of that reach of the foot out of the left hip. Well, it's not like the foot reaches out of your hip. There's more things, right? More matter that's above your foot, but you are trying to get the foot to direct the angle. I mean, they're usually what carry you around, so you identify with them as the leader of things. But if any of that material between the hip and the foot, you can move like your knee, you know, and see if you can alternate bending and reaching through the foot, bending the knee, reaching through the heel. And then as that left arm stretches either straight back or open to the left side, play with that option, straight back or bending the elbow and feeling what would be opening for the armpit chest. Okay. And then bend through that left knee and kind of pull. Now I've got my back really, all of it's on the, as much as I can on the bolster. My seat is right on that edge. So when I come back up and I get both feet up into the belt, you want to be sure when you take your feet out wide that you really do feel like you've got your hands on the belt. The belt's not buckled up, so it's kind of a free belt, right? It's not locked up. No locked belts at this moment. But my feet step out wide and my back of my pelvis it's tilted, right? It's on the bolster. And by now you might become friends with your bolster, right? You started to learn how to kind of adapt to its form and use it to support you. I don't know if that's a friend or what, but it's a support. The bolster's a support. Okay, now be pretty vast with the feet. So it's as if they're in a really wide stance, right? They are wide, go for it. The nice thing here is you got your hands to hold on to the belt. So there's something about feeling connected in your upper and lower body versus buckle it up. Okay. Now push up into the feet and try to make the front of the thighs very attentive, as if you're letting the thighs drain out, but there's also some consciousness that you can tone the legs. So with toning, we're going to pull so the arms are pulling down. You play with that so the shoulders are not lifting up to the ears, but the elbows are down. And then you slide the feet in. Now really exfoliate your feet here. So you want to go slow and get a feel when the feet are, well, actually your hands probably have to stop their pull at some point too. And then lower down the left leg and hold the belt together with the left hand. Cross the right leg, adjust on your bolster if you're sliding off or you don't feel quite supported, then move around, wriggle. And then let that left hand hold the belt and cross the right leg over and try to reach it downstream. So you feel that it's a foot pushing, but not trying to jab the foot. You know, you might touch to that right hip and kind of notice where you feel the definition and the tone in the leg. And if it's helpful for you to bend the left or the right knee, or to turn the ribs to the right side, kind of play with your version of this. So if you got some back achy and your core is feeling flaky, that can be sometimes that coordination happens, right? You're not really feeling very core tone or supported. The back can feel some tension. Okay, so use this opening of the class right now to really work on this center of gravity since we're tilted upside down. Okay, so we'll keep that going. We're going to bend the right knee. And this time I want you to simply slide the left foot in and then take the belt off and move the knees to point in and take a push here with the hands on the bolster. So you're going to push the bolster forward so it's no longer under your pelvis, but as you slide and your upper body is all the way on the ground, all the way to the back of the hips and the rear, step onto the bolster and feel the space of the knees kind of moving, pointing out as if they were both pointing outwards. Okay. Now place could be a ball or a block, either one. Place an object between the knees, and the knees have to go a little bit inwards to hold on to it. They may still be a little pointed out, but move the thigh muscles together as if you are working on keeping the thighs squeezing inwards for this whole time. So we lift up the hips, we have to kind of work our way into our feet and then motion the thigh bones to lift up, and then find the right lift with awareness. Is your head feel okay with this blanket? Know that you probably have one behind you, so just be aware if you push it back, there might be some pushback with your other blanket. But lift up the hips and be curious, alternating the drawbridge pose. So let the spine slide back down all the way through the channel of the back of the pelvis. Okay, good. So come into this drawbridge now with your arms active this time. Stretch your arms back overhead. And then as you lower the spine, really try to be sensitive to the layers of movement you can receive when you lower down. So right then I found something I don't think I'd really found before in a bridge pose, but it's always a little bit of a study with these suppleness of our backs. So when you lift up your hips, if this makes your back kind of achy, work your arms reaching back so there's a little more height involved with the hips. Good. And then as you move your hips forward, and they are going forward when they go down, bring your arms up towards the ceiling, but really find that you're squeezing into the block or ball. And then with that squeezing, you're leading your spine down towards the bolster. It's a real workout to help your spine stay spatially open and fluid. And the fluidity requires you to kind of keep things pulling together and then spacing them out. So keep going with this drawbridge. Right, you don't have to stop the pattern. Or if you feel like pausing and sensing the circulation, that would be very helpful, likely, to kind of notice where your ground level is at the bridge, and then how you elevate into that drawbridge and motion the upper body back. And there's always something missing from any pose, like something more you could add that's hard to establish in this range. Like, for instance, you could do down dog or cat cow or some nice expressive lanes of reaching, which we'll get to, but feel what you're doing in the front body that you probably wouldn't be doing if you were in those other poses. Okay, now next time you center down your spine, okay, I want you to remove that block and keep it. Well, if you had the ball, you put that away, but you get a block. And then cross the right ankle to the left knee and place the block on the inner right leg. And it's going to be individual if your block is kind of turned to its second setting, or it's flat, or you pivot it to actually form, kind of cover the leg. I like to keep it across horizontal. So when I push into that right leg, I want you to focus on the horizontal breath. So wide through the ribs. So you're not really kind of pushing that thigh to take your spine out of support. So I want you to kind of resist that so your spine has some strength. Give it a few moments. So the arms have to kind of work a little bit here. Okay, so when you remove that pressure with the block, you're going to put that to the floor, and then reach your right leg so it crosses over the left. It just simply sweeps over to cross, and then the legs shift to the right. So you'll start to jazz up that thigh musculature, right? So we're going to do just a few more on the back, but I do want you to notice that once you get to that kind of, you've been on the back for a while, the sleepiness that might come in, is to work with this from ribs to hip. Feel that space there, feel the difference, that lengthening in that midsection, but also the twist that's coming in down to the thighs. Okay, and then take the hands to interlace and turn the palms up towards the ceiling. and reach them to what is your range. It could be overhead all the way. It might be about halfway. It might be that you cross your right arm over your upper chest and hold the right elbow and stretch your deltoid on the right arm. That could be another pose, another piece to the pattern. Okay. Now centering the arms down and then switch. So knee back center, left foot crosses to right knee, block to the left thigh. These are all pretty adaptable patterns to where you're at. So if you decide this is too much with a block and you would prefer to draw that leg, the right leg in by holding on the back of it, but that means both legs go towards your center, that could work out. Right? You choose. And the block pushing to that left leg, I find it to be just sort of information for the muscles, not necessarily any relief that comes from this part. This piece is, it's kind of loading into that muscle belly on that left leg. Now, putting that block down, you're going to cross the left leg over the right. And then once it kind of slides over and closes it, then you lean your knees to the left. And you might have a block over there under the legs. You might find that's really helpful. Or maybe it limits your range, so it's not helpful for everyone. There's not like a pose instruction that's a good, everyone do this, is there? It's always a little thing that you kind of tweak. But you know, this whole waist place, the waist place, and how the spine is twisting, and we're going to get into a nice kind of final twist pattern before we come up, but I want you to feel where is that circulation strolling through the hip, or does it kind of burrow in one spot and, you know, feel stagnant sometimes where that area is a little bit fixed. It's on a fixed position. Some of the parts are in fixed experience. They don't really shift a lot. Now with the knees in that pattern moving left, we're going to keep the thighs squeezing together, like you've got some imaginary object that is, you don't want to slip out. So you do try to squeeze them together as the knees move back in center. And then uncross and windshield wiper. But this windshield wiper is not with a bolster under our back, right? It has a little bit more swish to it. If you happen to have a ball, you will probably want to use that right now for placing it underneath one of the glutes, one of the buttocks, and massaging through that area. So you might just put that ball under and then lift up the body onto that. And maybe you stay on that glute and you kind of massage on that side. So I know most of us are, it's going to be 50-50 with the ball. So those that don't have that are going to keep with this swishing the knees side to side, not adding anything like a block. Just the ball's a little different because it's the structure has, you know, a little give to it. You can get some loosening of the tissues when it softens around them. Okay, now as we move, those of you that are using the ball will have to switch it to the other rear and take your time. You'll be joining us a little bit down the road. And then those of us that are swishing, windshield wipering, are ready to go. So we're going to shift our bolster to the right side of our mat, but it's off of the mat. And if you need to add a blanket on top because the leg doesn't relax onto the bolster, that would indicate something on top besides just your leg. And the block can be useful under the leg. It's just really finding that you can use that with a sandbag. I find the blanket works better for me. But I've seen it kind of all directions. People find that works. So apply your if you have a ball to the sacrum, and a sandbag is the most obvious addition here. So we're going to put that sand on the outer left leg towards the knee, and the key is towards the knee. So that packing on that leg is strengthening all the way up into the hip, right? It's giving you traction. So with that observed focus with the legs, can you let your left arm stay open, and maybe your head rolls to the left? Yeah, kind of feel how these have been a cumulative kind of series of motions that we arrived to this one. This is just the first, chapter of the story today. So right before the second one, we have an opening pattern of working in our hip from being on our back, which can be really soothing, a little bit easier going. Okay, now when you're in this shape, notice if you come into any new relationship with your breath, or if you're not even sure you do anything special, you just kind of lay there. That's okay. That's a good one. But maybe let it be a practice where you are observing and participating with the wise relationship of inhale, filling the lungs, and then exhalation, empty the lungs. And feel that it moves in your belly and your ribs. And eventually finding that those two areas kind of move together in tandem with the breath, especially when you're on your back. Okay. Now, when we come out, I want you to take a moment with the legs moving away from you, meaning a 90 to 60 degree angle. So a little bit of stomach strength. So as you motion your knees back in, you moved all your props off of you. And you're gonna maybe push down into your heels. So this kind of, if I push my heels down and I kind of rock a little bit forward on my tailbone, the body rocking sequence work is really great to work with yielding to gravity and so forth. So this is often taught where you'll have your heels straight down in front, right? The body is in this completely laying down pattern without any props, right? Maybe you got a blanket under your head, but you rock through the heels to kind of pull the body muscles forward and down. It jostles the internal jostle. And you can also do this with your feet on the ground, right? Knees pointing up, that means. And do that kind of rocking with the pelvis. But I want you to kick up the feet towards the sky, and then hands down so they're straight down. Maybe they're next to your hips, maybe they're farther down because you're taller arms. But lower the legs. And I like the instructions sometimes where you make a fist and you kind of, you're sitting on it, but then it doesn't really feel great on my hands, to be honest. It's an interesting lift. So I come back to this classic, my palms are down. It's not as easy, but I'm not sitting on my hands. Okay, now when I bring the feet forward, I find where there's a little bit of kind of muscling into it. I start to grip up shoulders, back. That's a little too far. So I'm going to find where I'm starting to get shaky. I'm going to bring my legs a little closer towards 90 degree. Inhale. And then you exhale and you bring your legs a little bit forward. Feel the circulation in the spine. I know it's a little bit tense in the lower abdominal space there. And then come back up. Okay, straight up to 90. Inhale, belly full. And exhale, bring the legs back forwards. So you might go a few degrees more than 60. But some of us do tend to go farther down, but it's a grippy in the leg pattern. So be kind, let it be interesting for your muscles, and then let the legs move straight back up. Okay. Bend your knees, maybe hold on to them and rock a little side to side. And then from there, you're going to get your bolster and then move it to the left side of your mat and change the side. Now I'm going to give you a little bit of a, I don't know if letting you know where we're going with this is an optimal teaching way to go, but we are going to be doing a little bit of standing work. So I want you to just kind of let your spine really work in the stretch here. So when you cross the right leg over to the left to the bolster, let that sand be on the outer right leg towards the knee and the ball if you have one. But coordinate the muscles so that the focus is in the circulation from your ribs down to your hip and then across to the knee. So use your props to support that balance across into that knee. Okay. Stretch your arms, maybe they widen, and adjust and fuss around, and feeling that we're kind of trying to get as much length as you can between these muscles, you know, between hip and knee, creating some space between. And then of course you can soften through the right leg a little bit, and mostly through the left, it's letting go. And then feeling the experience of breathing, expanding and contracting. And experiencing that moving shape of the breath and the stillness of the muscles. Yeah, the ball could be helpful just to anchor the hip frame. And then the experience is to circulate through the powers of the pelvis and the rib body. So that might mean your head turns to the right. Maybe you don't want to have your brain have to go any direction. It's just kind of right where it seems to be comfortable. Okay, now scanning how it is on the side of the leg, right? Now noticing that this is a part that when we do some standing work, it's sort of challenging to try to get that side of the leg to wake up. But right now it's kind of getting there. It's the lateral rotators, you know, the IT band. And that's can be kind of tense fascia. I mean, it makes sense. It's kind of holding you to help you stand and be upright. So when we're on our backs or all fours, we can kind of jinx it a little bit. So I want you to start to slide the ball away and the sand. And let's see where we'll shape ourselves to get up. Let's go for it here with this. We'll move our body part towards the either direction. If you need to swing your knees to the other side and rock, go for it. But see if you can go to getting up from rolling to a side versus rolling to both posts. And then you'll come up and we're going to slide the blanket back in to the center of the mat. It wasn't ever really there anyway to start with. And then your blanket at the back is kind of off to another place. It'll come in perhaps. Put the bolster down in front so it's straight down, smack dab lengthwise forward. And then when I take the hand position down, I want you to feel where the stretch of the palms opens out and the toes hook under. And when you have this kind of activation, and also it looks like you're going to rest on a bolster, it's tempting to just kind of drop down. But feel the toes under and lift up the knees into down dog and stretch through the circulation of the back muscles of the legs. And feel that reach from sitting bone to heel bone. And when the knees want to alternately bend, like you're pedaling through the pose pattern, that would be great. Pose pedaling. Pedal your pose out. And work on the circulation of the bottom of the foot, all the way from the ball of the foot towards the heel. Even if that doesn't strike down, it's interesting to feel the muscles at the lower leg trying to stride into that stretch of the foot. And then feel that reach through the foot. And then when we come back forward, we're going to come forward to an upright push-up position. So that means instead of putting your knees down, you're moving your weight through the crown of the head. Your knees could come down any time. There's no rule here, but my knees are close together. I mean, I have the legs really right side by side, hoping that the magnet of my knees will help hold me up. Okay. Now, spreading the shoulder blades across the back, lower down on the blanket, okay? And you might have to be creative how you get on your bolster here, but you're gonna lower down. And then when you move your chest forwards, can you let your hands, maybe you lower your ribs down, let your hands widen out on the floor, on the mat. And then see if you can move your elbows down. Seems like you really lose some stuff here to get all the way to the floor. But you're working on regaining that inner support. So elbows down, Sphinx pose. They're kind of right next to the bolster, huh? Yeah. And then when the elbows are down, you'll feel that length from the spine root towards the brainstem, right? There's strength in that positioning for your back. So be cautious here how much you let your back arch. Feel where it's naturally with the elbows down. And you just go into the arch, how that works. The elbows touch down. You try to lift up your chest. Okay. Now, with the hands sliding back and the knees separating a little bit more, you're going to press down through your hands and then lift up the chest. Really use that bolster right now to support your front. And then as you scoop up, like this is the scooping part. If you think of the bridge pose we did on the back, lifting and lowering the hips, this is kind of the opposite angle of that, but it's so similar for your back demands. And then we'll toe under and then come back to table. Now this way I kind of had a little bit of an epiphany with that. I hooked my toes under and then I kind of lifted up my belly like a little bit of a cat spine and then moved back to all fours. So play with that because maybe you have time to do that sometimes. Play with how you get into that. And then move your bolster forward and we'll take a step into this one. So I want you to get your blocks, put them on the very sides of your mat to start, and take the hands inside the sides of the mat, right on the inside line, and reach your spine forward to that up dog and lift up the crown of the head. So you're gonna feel that it stretches up and back. And then as you come back to table, you're gonna reach your hips back and round your back a little bit. So it's almost a cat spine, but you are curling and have the hands open, fingers wide. Okay, so enjoy this pattern, right? It's a little bit between cat and then almost moving towards cow. Okay, and then we'll move forward, but I want you to look at your knees, at least take a peek at them, they're right there. And then we're gonna take one of them forward. So what might be interesting for you is to kind of feel what it's like when the knees are together and you're on all fours. Your head is kind of creeping in, chin towards chest. And then you'll lift up the right leg. Actually, no, let's go with left leg first, okay? So bring the left knee in towards your face, so you're tucking. And then my left foot, right, I'm trying to get that to step forward. So for me, honestly for me, it is easier with my hands on my blocks. So I'm going to step forward to do what's easiest with my hand support. And then once that step comes through, lift up the back knee and stretch that right heel down and take a step so that your feet are in two different planks, right? So they're in two different lanes of travel. They're not in the same exact lane. Good. So let that back heel be however high it might be. I would be more into accepting where it is. And if it does feel like it can go down to the floor, but you need to kind of turn your foot out a little bit on the back leg, that is okay. Okay. So feel the reach of the torso. Everything's kind of pinned down as far as your feet go. And your mid body, we can move it a little bit. So back heel is trying to lower down. Left knee is going to bend. And now I want you to lower the back heel down and maybe turn the foot out. So you're kind of getting ready for a warrior one pose. So that left knee goes forward above the ankle. And we send the arms forward. And we're going to lift up. You might lose part of me in the visual here. But when you lift up, I want you to focus on this back front hip stretching up. Right? So the back heel's got to be down. So if your back foot is lifted up and you're kind of falling out of balance, take your stance maybe a little bit shorter, maybe a little bit farther out with the left foot. Just don't turn the foot out. And get a sense, the only foot that can turn out is the back foot on this, is that the spine going up and you're reaching. Okay. Now open out the arms, open the chest wide, lift up the heart, and then lean forward to get a hold of those blocks under your hands. And then I want you to lengthen that left leg, turn the back foot so the heel is up, and send the left arm open and up. And be slow with the approach into that revolved triangle. Get a feel of directional motion and reach. Breathe. Good. Yeah, so we did this on our back with many opportunities with our twists and the rotation, but it's a little different when you're standing, the hip crossing. And let's keep that left arm back. So we'll swing it back and then it'll sweep down to the block again. And then kind of work your space of your shoulders. You might kind of shimmy the shoulders a little bit. Try to get some blood flow in the shoulders here. And then step that right foot forwards and take a wider stance with your feet than predicted. So stepping them apart and bending the knees. And then letting the spine reach out of the tail and then lower your head down. Either hold the back of the legs or let your arms drain down out of the back. Whichever is the most inviting for your moment to release. So I like to let my head do some little nodding actions. And then you might find that the knees bending is soothing to your back and your belly. And experience the breathing, the inverted breath. This might be feeling like more of an inversion than when you're on your back with legs up because you don't do this one as often, right? The other one you're well versed in. It's not as surprising to your circulation. But in this one, it is nice to get your head down and then feeling the pressure down to your feet. Okay. Stretch the back of the legs very fully, right? So that you really feel that lift at your sitting bones. And hands move to your blocks and scoot your feet in close. Now, we're going to take a wide stance first on this side. So we'll step the left foot back. We'll turn to our left. So you're going to take both blocks in tow, or when you turn your toes to the left, and you'll take a drinking giraffe version here. So my feet are in a wide stance. The toe inward pattern is not as essential here for this path with our back muscles, but kind of feel how your heels press down. Your knees might be trying to hyperextend, so micro bends might be good for some of us. But reach the blocks far in front of you, like you're in this wide downward dog. In fact, you're in your own little space here in some ways. So work your way back with your hips and down with your head between the arms and get that full reach. Right, and we're all different with our variations, right? And limitations. So you might find, oh, this is so wonderful sensations for my back, or maybe it's too much pressure in your shoulders. So if it's too much shoulder pressure, what I'd recommend you do is put your hands straight down under your shoulders. You might have to scoot your blanket into the middle of things and bring your hands back so they're in line with your toes. They can be on blocks, right? And they can be on floor. And then see if you can bring your knees to a little micro bend and then maybe the crown of your head down, right? So that's another option versus the hands forward. I think they're both kind of interesting. I see a goodness to this full inversion with the hands in line with the toes, but it's not available for everyone. Sometimes it might be just too shaky. So with time, you might adapt it, use your blocks or bring your feet closer in and then get a feel for that. So lots of inverting here. Now sitting bones have their positioning of lift. Okay, so bend the knees and motion up. And then turn towards your front leg. You've got to bring both blocks with you to go to the right foot. And we're going to keep that right foot as the forward reaching angle, right, of the extremities. And the back heel, see if you can kind of work on reaching straight back through that heel towards the floor at first. Since this time we're coming up from the upper version versus lunging and then up. We're going right into that angle. So the right hip might be kind of poking out. Bend the right knee so the hip doesn't poke as much open. And then that back heel turns out a little bit. Just the smallest sliver to help you achieve a base, a nice architectural base. And then hands forwards or on your thigh to help you come up and reach in towards that warrior one and get a feel of that right knee. And I would be a little back on the knee versus trying to push it forward. Find where your mid body is getting its reach. And the arms might be stretching open. The arms might be straight up. You might find that the achievement in twisting towards finding your center line is the challenge out of this left front hip. So kind of feel how this front left hip is stretching down and towards the heel. And then your knee needs to kind of be helped out of both legs. So there's something going on the whole time here in Warrior One, huh? It's a happening stance, happenstance. So feel where the ribs are opening with the arms now. And then come down. Now that's a pretty rib full position, right? It could be very billowed out. So when you lower down, these ribs are going to kind of float. The floating ribs are motioning down. And once the hands come down, that back heel lifts up, or maybe it already did. And the right arm opens out and you turn into your right hip. Okay. So the left hand, if it's really pushing into the block, which is what happens to mine, you might spider your hand. You could lower your block so you could spider your hand better. Your fingers stand out so you don't push into your wrist. It's just harder the lower the block is, right? But you'll be a little bit more supportive of your wrist that way. So play with it. If your right knee doesn't want to straighten, don't push it. It's only going to go so far, isn't it? There's always further to go. Sweep the right arm so it goes back and down, easy, and then lower down onto the equal height on your blocks. Stretch your back heel towards the floor for a few moments. Smooth out the calf. Breathing. Okay, and get that feel for the calf on that left leg. And what's kind of the parts of the bone structure that feels like it could use some reaching right now? Just checking in, bending the right knee, lowering the left knee down, and then we'll take a reach back. So I want you to move that right knee back, right? We kind of got here this way from kneeling. So what we'll do is take our blocks away to the sides for a moment, and then move our bolster right next to our blanket. And then you're going to need to take a block in front of that bolster and a blanket on top of the block. Okay. Okay, so we'll come into side sage with a blanket under our hip this time. So we'll turn to our left. Well, you're turning to your left side, but you're on your right hip. And the bolster could be your round bolster. If you have a round circular bolster, get it. Use that for under here. If you don't, you're out of luck. It's okay. But we'll have a ball on the inside, or you'll stay with what you got. The inside of the left leg, or nothing, or a block. And then you'll take your stand on that outer left hip. Okay. So come in with the right arm down. I know that some of you like a block overhead, so you might have to adjust things to get that help. But once you arrive with your head side on your blanket, take the time to support the circulation through this whole side vent. It's like your vent on the side. Yeah, once you slide into the shape after all that busybody work, it's kind of nice to have that build up to doing that, and then you kind of lower down and ease into these parts. So we're still in a lunging pose, but we're resting on our side. But our body probably still senses some of that knee movement. So take some care here. If you find your right knee doesn't go really up to the bolster, it might be different with your blanket under your hip. If you can't stand that, you can always go back to the old drawing board on side sage with two blankets on the other side. Okay, now left arm is either overhead or it's open. If you want to keep that sand on, adjust, but you might even move your left arm out. And if this feels like it's a bit of a chest stretch, but zero back stress, then it shows you that these openers are good for our back. When you're on your back doing them, it's difficult to accept that they're good for the back sometimes. Now feeling that left arm in its reaching pattern. Okay, now we're going to come out, but what we'll do is we'll go to a reclining cobbler's pose between these two sides. So you'll slide your sand away, okay, and you'll bring your left knee towards the right and kind of roll in towards this change. So you'll shift to towards your bolster and then take the blanket off of the block. This is good to learn how to set up just because this pose has so many options. You can leave your block overhead. I don't think that will affect it, but if you have it, leave it. And then you'll place your bolster so it's tipped up on the block. It's kind of leaning on a block as you put a blanket on top of the bolster across it, horizontal. And your bolster is spine-wise. So when I turn and I'm sitting on this blanket and I shift back into my bolster for Baddha Konasana, Supta Baddha, I've got my feet touching. And when the outer border of the foot is touching the most, I'm going to slide my feet down and see if I can kind of catch the support there, which is a little challenging for my inner thigh muscles. So if it's not accepting for your situation, it doesn't feel right, you can always pass on the pose and bring your feet down, soles down, and knees touching together, and walk the feet a little wider to pyramid pose. So that's a good option. And I think it's nice to just let your spine find its symmetry after the last pose. And then you just let the legs do what they feel the most. Maybe you're interested in that little challenge of the feet together, knees apart. And if it's tough just to let them stay in that still position, that's the challenge, then work a little bit with that butterfly of motion the whole time. Just let it be very slow, guided, knees up and knees out. Try to ease the adductors. Okay, now next time your knees go up, you're going to slide your feet back in towards your seat, brief pose, and then roll to the left hip. Now try to get your movement to happen from your feet into your hips. So I know we usually use our hands a lot to get around, but get a feel if you can move from your lower bones to shift and roll to your left. It doesn't have to be hands-free operation now, but you might get a feel like how much you can use your mid body and your rib body to get around. And then you adjust. You get your bolster to next to your blanket and you turn it. And usually it can go pretty quickly here. We can get the ball on the inside of the right leg, and we can get our sand and layer it on our side, whether it's lengthwise or across the hip, and then come in with that reach of the right arm. Yeah, let the spine reach in across from the spine, which is usually a one spot, right, that you point to, even if it's long. Yeah, we generally point to the back, but you want to feel it branch through the ribs and then the front of the spine. Okay, so have this experience of moving your arm up, over, maybe on top of a block. You can get a sense of that support somewhere over there. And the left arm is really just relaxed. It's not doing too much. Expansion and contraction. Now enjoy that kind of that experience of the side lengthening. Yeah, if the weight of that right leg is kind of lifting up versus lowering to the ball or the floor, that's okay. The right leg, right? Some people might do this pose pattern without the sand and have that right knee pointing up and touching that right foot actually to the left foot, right? I've seen this pattern, and then the arm opens. That's another option without sand, and just really using that concentration of the ribs to oscillate through that core. It's kind of fun. So I think shifting it around is a really good idea, with the ideal of opening up through the chest reservoir. Take a few more moments. Either version, if you try something different, it's okay. Just to let it happen. Okay. Now, when we roll to our left, you want to move any of those objects that are maybe on you, your sand, anything that might be holding you back, and then roll and turn. We're going to take some cooling poses, even though it's cooling off outside. We'll take some coolers. So we're going to take our bolster and push it in front, and you're going to swing your left knee open. And can you let the blanket be one blanket? Let's try that one blanket policy here, see if it works. And it makes you work a little harder, but you're at that final part of the class. You should be warmed up, but we'll see. So my left knee is open, and what I'm going to do is put my other blanket under my left knee, because this is very kind, right? The ball and blocks are good, but the blanket's even better because you can really mush it, and it's such a soft thing to have. You can bunch it up if you need a little more height. You just use that. You take what you need, and you can even roll it underneath. And then with that right knee open, I'm going to lift up the bolster, tip it up actually. Don't lift it overhead. Just tip it up so the short end is on the floor. And you can add sand on the left thigh or just keep it purely plain. And lean forward. And cat the spine. So cat spine, that's rounding the back. And then feel the reach of those armpit chest lanes. And motion, so the armpit is trying to lengthen. Yeah, this is possible, getting this armpit chest to open. Okay, your head is between the arms. Steady to focus. Forward bend, calming, cooling. Now, take that right leg, so it's going to cross in center, and you're just simply going to take a simple cross-legged pose so the right leg crosses. You could do this with your foot on the bolster, so I'm just going to let you see that shape so you kind of can see it easier when it's on the bolster right now. But I'm going to work with the bolster up on this version, but you could have your foot on the bolster too. You could choose. You could choose that option. But you're leaning forward, and instead of that cat spine, you're working a little bit to neutral. So you're just simply motioning forward to neut. Okay. And you get a feeling of your back trying to move into its arching and restrictive phase. But can you let your head be between the arms? Level out the circulation. I'm doing the sand free. You can always add sand anytime to the legs, the upper inner leg. Okay, now we'll come out of this side, but bring both legs to point outwards at the feet, stretching them open. And then as you lean forward, flex through your feet. And then change the side so that right leg is going to bend. And you're just going to keep it so simple, getting your blanket over to that side. Or if you're not using a prop under your right leg, that's okay. Might be good though to just have something. So it kind of buoys up the knee. And as that right leg is open, bending, the left leg is out. So it's at about 10, 11 o'clock on that left side. But as you range your spine, you'll let your back reach, but also it's a blend. It's kind of like we've come full circle. At the beginning, we had these kind of awareness patterns for our back muscles. So as we're moving into that spine, neutral versus too much tugging on the back, feel the weight of your head creates that neutral spine. So bowing in towards the pose. And then taking that crossing with that left foot forward of the right shin. It doesn't have to be compact. You don't have to tighten the leg in closer. You might have it freely forward and stretching the ankle and the foot and that leaning pattern. Feeling the movement of the ribs with your breath. So with that rib movement and that forward tilt, let's find something that's kind of peaceful to balance into at the end. So I want to give you the option to have your legs up the wall, legs up a chair, shoulder stand, which is very restorative shoulder stand version. If you feel safe to do that, that sounds good. It's restorative, but do you feel safe? Or you can do bolster bench. So if you're going to take your blocks in front, you can also come up to a wall and bring your legs up the wall and have a bolster or a blanket under your pelvis. But we did a lot of that lift on the bolster, so I'm kind of feeling this might be the best option for variety's sake, but it's up to you. So you're going to move your bolster on top of either the blocks or right next to a wall space, or some of you might do that chair shoulder stand. And so you'll prop up your base. You want to get your roots. And if you are kind of near a wall space, you might put this setup. I was working on this yesterday on getting the feet at the wall with this pose. And I didn't find complete serenity with it, but apparently it's supposed to be there. I wasn't finding it with a shape, so I'm still searching for it. But if I get my legs enough over the bolster, right, I get close enough, my feet at the wall, it's very grounding to be at a wall, or just the wall as a grounding prop, okay? So we lower on our back and we've got our blankie under our head and we've got our legs. The heels can float. You can do this without your feet at a wall, of course, with your heels floating. There's benefit to that as well. But I'm working with trying to experience this as much as I've read about it. Experience my feet at the wall and feeling grounded. Maybe it'll show up sometime. And the legs, but if the heels float back, I'm just so used to it, feels really good. Trying to try new things here. So I get the sand and it's going to go from my heart down to the belly. So it's going to go spine wise. Okay. Get that sand tube. Okay. Find what the weight of it you'd like to have in the different places. This actually starts to get my feet a little more centered once I have the sand here. It's kind of interesting how this lines up. Might be good for you to try it. And your feet could be up on a couch too, I suppose. You might be completely working yourself around your space now. So space the arms so that they are lower than the height of your shoulders. They're down. And if you're in the chair shoulder stand, they're definitely going to be under the height of your shoulders and through the chair. And so it goes, the shoulders are back. And we levelize the influence of breathing through the nostrils with the exhalation of letting go. So feel that the sand offers your abdomen that awareness, but really it's the diaphragm, the breathing muscle that is being worked in this moment. So feeling the sandbag weight challenges the breathing muscles. Making some space with your inhale, opening the heart. Letting gravity have you. Now, most importantly, whichever pose you chose, right, you're working with the openness of the front spaces and the sensation of landing back on the shoulders and opening in front of those shoulders at the circulation in the throat the thyroid, swallowing to clear that passageway. If you're very upside down, you'll certainly feel that passageway circulating, turning the organs in a different position, flushing and cleansing. Okay, now when we start to shift out, if you're at the chair, this might be a good time for you to start to mobilize your leg a little bit, your leg shape, so that the feet might come to the back bar of the chair, knees out, feet together, just to give the legs that drifting down. And then if we're up on the bolster right now, you want to let them remain the exact same, but change your sand support. So you'll shift that away. And then if you're at the chair, you need to start to move your arms so that if they're clutched under between at the legs of the chair, to start to release that grasp after you put your feet on the chair seat. Then release the grasp and start to slide back. So we all kind of get a meeting of the legs lifted. Now, can you let the arms eventually, for all of us, we'll start to slide down and get to that shape that we're in, with the arms by the sides. And then as you take the time, if you are just still coming out of shoulder stand, you'll probably need to take a few more moments to get that center of gravity all the way to the brain, lengthening on the floor. And then as you walk the feet up to the edge of the chair seat or the bolster blanket stack. And then we move our knees maybe towards the chest. Maybe you bring your feet to cobbler for a moment. But noticing what is the best choice for my back. So it's a good to do cobbler pose, but we don't want to spend our class doing it over and over because of how it kind of pokes around into the side joint, which is we want to hydrate that space. So feel what's the natural, which would be kind of draw the knees in a little bit. You can hug the back of the legs. If you're on a bolster under your pelvis, that's a little tough, but you do the best that you can and make the variation work for you. And then we'll let the body find its rolling capacity. You want to go to a side to get up and then come up and take a seat on a bit of height, whether it's cushioned height or slightly cushioned, so that we can come together as a collective kind of consciousness, centering our breath space into our mind space of connection. And let your hands either slide on the legs or roll the shoulders, doing any kind of loosening motions for these branches of arms up into your shoulders. All right, bring the hands towards one another, and then as they pull back towards the heart, bowing the brain to your heart center.